Welcome back to Who We Are and What We Need. I'm your host, Catherine Quiring, and today I have with me the lovely Dorcas Chang-Tozun. I found Dorcas through her book, Social Justice for the Sensitive Soul: How to Change the World in Quiet Ways. And we'll get into this, but when I found her book, I was like, oh, this is one of the big seminal questions I've had. Like, I'm so happy to have this book. And I was even more excited that when I reached out to Dorcas, she was like, yes, I would love to be on your podcast. Like, it just means so much to me that you would take time to be here. So, welcome so much, Dorcas.
Thank you, Catherine. I'm really glad to be here.
Thanks. And I'll give you a little more intro into who Dorcas is. Dorcas Chang-Tozun is an award-winning writer, editor, speaker, social impact professional, and former Inc.com columnist. She is the author of Start, Love, Repeat: How to Stay in Love with Your Entrepreneur in a Crazy Startup World, Let There Delight: How One Social Enterprise Brought Solar Products to 100 million people, and the one I mentioned, Social Justice for the Sensitive Soul: How to Change the World in Quiet Ways. Her work has appeared in the Wall Street Journal, Christianity Today, Image Journal, and dozens of other publications here in the US, Asia, and Africa. She has more than 20 years of experience in the nonprofit and social enterprise sectors and currently serves as a high school instructor of social innovation at Valley Christian Schools. I'm curious, since we just mentioned in your bio the part about your current role as a school instructor of social innovation, I would love to know more what you teach and what the social innovation is about.
Absolutely. So I feel extremely privileged to be able to teach this class. It's a high school level class. It's extremely unusual for this class to exist at the high school level. We actually modeled it after classes that are taught at universities like Stanford, Berkeley, MIT. There's been a real push in probably the last 20 or so years to incorporate design thinking into, I think, especially how we address really sticky, thorny social challenges that we are facing. And so how do we come up with creative, innovative solutions that truly meet the needs of the people that we are trying to serve? So I took some of what I knew of those classes at the college level and adapted it for high schoolers. And so that's what I do is I teach them about design thinking. I teach them about empathy, how to do ethnographic research, how to really understand user-centered design. And what I particularly love about this class is that it's not just about the curriculum and the academic requirements, but it is very much a hands-on project-based class. So everything that I teach them, they put into practice right away. So it's a year-long class. First semester, their main project is they split up into teams and do something on campus at school. So I have them look around campus, interview their fellow students, and ask them what at school is hard for you. Like what about the way school works do you feel like could be improved? What's causing challenges for you at this campus? And then they pick their own projects and they go through the entire process of researching and testing and prototyping. And then at the end of the semester, they present their best ideas to the school administrators in hopes of causing real change to happen at the school. And then second semester, we kind of level up. We take that same process, but we go out into the community. We partner with local community agencies. In the last couple of years, we've had the privilege of working with public agencies. So last year, we worked with the San Jose Police Department on pedestrian safety. This year, we're working with the city of San Jose and our county's district attorney's office on raising public awareness on scams and then homelessness with the city. And so they have projects related to those specific areas. There are problems that they're trying to help solve, problems that maybe the city or the county doesn't have the resources to fully address, or they just kind of don't have the time to take a very close look at this. And so we kind of come in as extra hands, new perspectives. And at the end of this semester, which is coming up really soon now, they're going to be presenting their final ideas and prototypes to elected officials, public staff, community leaders, their parents, school administrators. It's a big to-do. But what I love about it is it shows them that, well, one, high schoolers can absolutely make a difference in their community, that they are really creative, they have great ideas. Two, I think it shows them that people want to hear their ideas. That we get so much support from the school as well as the community partners that we work with, and it's incredibly empowering and encouraging for these young people to feel like I can do something. I have the tools. I know how to do this. It's actually not that complicated, but it's the exact same processes and tools that professional designers, engineers, entrepreneurs use. And I can do it as well, and I can make a difference in my community.
That is so cool. I'm curious, even for your students that are just so taken with this, like, what do you recommend or what would you recommend as like the next steps in like what even is a major that studies that, right? In college, or like what are the next steps to like pursue those types of social
Yes.
innovations? I
Well,
mean, I know,
yeah.
yeah.
We're at a good moment for that. So I do work with quite a number of seniors who are moving on to their next phase of life, and this is a growing area of interest across academia. So I would say pretty much every year there are more and more colleges and universities that are offering classes and majors similar to this. So either around design or around social entrepreneurship, around, creative solutions to justice issues. And so I have a number of students. The name of the major is different at pretty much every university,
Okay.
but they
Yes.
have told me this is what I'm studying next. It's very similar to your class. I have one former student who's going to be studying urban design, is what it's called. Another one
Mm.
is it's something like justice and design, or justice and technology, right? So there's all sorts of interdisciplinary majors and areas of study that these students are able to go on and explore. And so it's really exciting to see where they're going next and what they're going to do with all of that.
It is so exciting. And I know you mentioned one of the things that you teach is empathy. And that's one of the like little tidbits that stood out to me in your book
Mhm.
was all the types of empathy that you listed. I'm just curious how you developed those or where you found them and how that plays out in what you're teaching your students.
Empathy, what I love about it, I mean, similar to sensitivity, right? It can
Hmm.
look really different in different people. It can be expressed in different ways. So there was a book I had read, which I really appreciate, called The Happy Empath
Mm,
by life coach Christine Rose L. And so she is the one who came up with a list of 8 different types of empaths. And so you don't have to just be one, you could be several of these, but the 8 that she has, I'll just list them and then maybe explain a couple of them. Emotional empaths, I think that's probably the one we're most familiar with, where you really
right,
feel other people's feelings, you feel very deeply connected with them. Physical empaths, where you may actually feel the physical pain or other sensations that others experience. Energy empaths, plant empaths, animal empaths, intuitive empaths, aesthetic empaths who connect very deeply with art and literature, and environmental empaths who kind of always sort of know the vibe, right, of whatever
right,
space they are in, whether they are
right,
inside or outside. They just always know kind of how things are feeling in there, how whoever else is occupying that space is feeling. So yeah, it's really fascinating, and I imagine there is still so much more that we can learn
right.
about what empathy is and how it gets expressed.
Yeah, I think that's so amazing. It felt like it gave me some additional language around empathy and additional categories that I hadn't had before.
I really do think of empathy like a superpower. On the one hand, I believe that it can be a skill that can be taught, or a practice that we can learn. And then I think there are some who kind of just intuitively, innately, like it's just part of who we are. And
Mhm.
it's deeply a part of who we are, and it is this incredible superpower that gives us this powerful sense of connection with all kinds of beings and places around us, whether they are people or animals or nature. So, as an empath myself, it is something I love, and it also comes with its own burdens, as I'm sure you understand.
Yes.
That sense of just constantly feeling and feeling what everyone else is feeling. It's a lot.
Yes. I even wrote a tiny little therapeutic story around it because it took me forever to realize that not everybody feels like they're a sponge. I felt like I was a
Hmm.
sponge just soaking in everybody's emotions and energy my whole life and almost like eating them or soaking them in through my pores. And it was a long time before I realized not everybody felt that way. And then, oh, there's other choices I have around this. Because where do you find information about that, right? It's so rare, like to come across
Hmm.
information to understand what it means to be an empath and like how to care for yourself and harness those gifts. If you want to speak a little bit to your experience.
I think as an empath, there is an important recognition that we kind of all need to get to of this is my limit. This is a wonderful gift that I have to bring to the world, and it's not something that I can allow myself to feel and experience 24/7 because it's just
Yeah.
too much. It takes too much out of me. And so as hard as it is, I think especially for empaths, there is something to be said about boundaries. There's something to be said about limiting our exposure to the um, situations that particularly drain us. I think one really tangible example for me is in the last few years, I've had to really limit my exposure to the news. I'm a news junkie. I love knowing what's going on. And at the same time, I realized that it was taking so much out of me simply to process what I was hearing and seeing through the news that it was taking away from my ability to actually be present to what was right in front of me. And so I've placed certain limits on myself of, recognizing, for example, hearing news over the radio, watching news on television or over video, that actually it hits me harder emotionally. And so more often now I will read the news, because at least that's a little bit easier for me to kind of skip around or filter or just sort of not let myself kind of go as deep with things. Sometimes there are times when there's so much going on in the news that I just allow myself to skim the headlines. I think it's important to know what's going on, but I find that if I delve into every single story that I come across and hear and then carry the pain of so many people all around the world, it becomes paralyzing for me. And I don't know that that's helpful for me or for anyone else, right? And so I kind of walk that balance of I want to know what's going on. I want to know what injustices are happening. At the same time, I don't have the emotional capacity to know everybody's story. I can know a few, enough to get a sense of it, but I also need to recognize that I can't carry all of that. And that's okay. I think there can be a lot of guilt around that. I feel like, no, 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 I should hear everything. I should expose myself to everything. And I think we as humans are just not, it's just not in our capacity to carry that much of an emotional burden. And so it's okay to kind of step back a little bit and recognize like, hey, I'm already carrying a lot. I care very deeply about these issues. I'm doing what I can to try to make this planet of ours a little bit kinder and gentler and more accepting and more equal. But at the same time, I'm just one person. And so I cannot do and feel and be exposed to everything. It's just not possible.
Yeah, I totally resonate with that. I have a similar process where like I read the headlines or I read a little bit more, but like I
Yep.
don't I don't watch the news ever. Sometimes I listen to a little bit on NPR. And anything that I do read more in depth is like someone I follow on Substack that gives me more like sociological and historical context, because then it's like, oh, that
Mm-hmm.
helps me digest it and put this in the context that I needed. So I wanted to talk about the 6 areas of justice work that you've identified for highly sensitives.
I think one of the main things that I wanted to address through this book is the recognition that we are not all wired in the same way. And so, therefore, we are not all going to be addressing injustice in the same way, right? There are these certain models of justice advocacy that we have seen in history, that we see in headlines, that we see in books that get highlighted a lot. And so it can be easy to think, well, if I care about these issues, I need to be doing these particular things. You know, I have to join these protests. I have to speak at a press conference. I have to do canvassing, community organizing. And those are all wonderful ways of participating in trying to bring about change. And at the same time, I think for some of us, especially those of us who are particularly sensitive or empathic or introverted, those activities can just take so much out of us. It's almost like it takes more out of us than the benefit or the impact that we're able to have, again, just because of who we are. There's nothing, wrong with that. And so
Right.
I wanted to introduce, hey, there are all these other different ways of participating in the causes that you care about that are just as meaningful, that are just as effective, that have actually been done for decades, if not centuries. There are plenty of historical figures that have come before us that have done this in really meaningful ways. And it's just we don't hear about them as often, but they are very much there in the pages of history. And so these 6 categories were just to give people a taste of, hey, these are other really meaningful ways that either through your career, through volunteer service, and all other kinds of ways that you can participate to sort of begin to spark that imagination of it doesn't have to be this one way of engaging with justice work. There are dozens, probably hundreds of ways that we can each be engaging in justice work. And it's about finding, what fits you, your personality, what you care about, also what brings you joy, what kind of energizes you rather than just what drains you. And so the 6 that I came up with were connectors. So this is primarily relationship building, building bridges, connecting with people, maybe who are really different from you. There is so much power in just having kind, respectful conversations with people who come from different backgrounds. And I feel like we just, especially nowadays, we do not do that enough. And we have sort of forgotten how much influence and impact that can have. Just one really respectful and kind conversation. The second is creatives, right? Artists of all stripes who have oftentimes been at the center of social movements because they are the ones kind of painting a picture, literally or not, of the future that we are hoping to help create. They are helping us to see this is what's at stake. This is the heart of who we are and what we care about and what we want to see happen. So, this is songwriters and writers and playwrights, actors. I mean, any kind of artistic expression, dancers that you can think of falls under this category. I also, the third one is record keepers, which I actually really like this one because it's just sort of unexpected. It's not one that you might necessarily think of, but these are librarians, historians, archivists. They are the keepers um, of the stories of what has happened in the past, of helping us understand where we've come from, why we're at the moment in history that we're at. And it helps us to learn from some of the, terrible mistakes that have happened in the past. It helps us to better understand what wrongs have been committed, what and how can we right those wrongs. One really interesting thing I learned in my research is that when authoritarian leaders, regimes come into power, it is oftentimes the case that some of the people that they go after first are historians, because they are afraid of those records of history. They don't want people to have that understanding and that knowledge, because through that knowledge, that is how you can challenge injustice in your current day. And then the fourth is builders. So these are engineers, designers, inventors, people who are coming up with really cool new technologies that help bridge a lot of these inequalities and divides that we see today. Then equippers, that's teachers, mentors, coaches, anybody who is kind of helping to raise up leaders and advocates, community organizers, because none of us is born knowing how to be involved in justice work. We need to learn it, and somebody needs to teach us. And so maybe you are not the kind of person who is comfortable being in the spotlight, being on the front line, but you can be the person who equips others to do that, which is an essential role. And then finally, I have researchers. So these are academics, these are people, scientists, who really help us look closely at the social challenges that we are facing, help us understand through data, through surveys, through research, exactly what is going on, who is being harmed, to what degree, and that begins to point us toward solutions. How do we begin to really address what it is that's going on? So again, these are just ideas. There are probably, many dozens more categories that others could come up with, but I wanted to break that mold that a lot of us have of, social advocacy, social justice work only looks certain ways, because there are so many other ways that we can participate that are meaningful and truly do contribute to change in significant ways.
Yeah, I have been looking for these types of things. And so they've been so helpful to me personally, even just reading your book. And then I've like created a small social support group basically around um, just coping with everything happening these days and how do we um, resist and restore is what it's called, like care for ourselves
Mm,
and resist. And
mhm,
yeah, I've heard a lot of people looking for that relational activism kind of way of
yeah.
doing it and like fleshing that out, right? Like particularly, and I was thinking as you were talking of like Henry Louis Gates Jr. doing like the finding our roots, like the research and the record keepers and how important that is for delving into histories and healing and connecting dots and things like that, in addition to like
Mm,
all the history and everything. So anyway, those were just a few things that popped up for me. And when I was reading them, like all the flashing lights went off and when you got to creatives, and I was just like, oh, that's me, that's me. And it feels so good to have permission to just live there and not be like, I have to be at every protest or I have to figure out all the
mhm,
things that are happening and do all the things, right? Like I can do extra things, but this is my like wheelhouse. This is my like
mhm.
main place. And that feels
Yes.
really good to be able to settle into some. So
Yes, and
thank you
and
for
not
that.
only does it make sense for individuals like us, but these are the kinds of activities and personalities that every social movement needs. I think that was something super encouraging when I was doing my research, is that as you look across social movements, of course, you have your Gandhis and you have your Martin Luther Kings, and they get a lot of attention and they deserve a lot of attention. They're incredible individuals. At the same time, you don't need a million people being Martin Luther King, right? What you need is the tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people who are participating in activism in the small yet meaningful ways in their circles, in their communities, and that provides the scaffolding upon which somebody like a Dr. King can stand and have his message heard. His message would not have reached nearly as many people or have had quite the same impact without so many people behind him, as artists, as administrators, as engineers, teachers, right? There were just so many aspects of the civil rights movement. And so to know that it's not a lesser form of activism. It's not like you're, copping out of the real activism. Like we need people to bring their gifts, to bring their passions in every area of life. These are extremely complex problems that we face as communities, as countries. And so we need a multifaceted, very diverse approach to how do we address all of that. And so I really do hope that within activist circles, we can do a bit of a better job of opening the doors a little bit wider and broadening the definition of what activism looks like, because we need everybody, as many people as are willing to come to the table in order for widespread change to happen.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm curious, any specific opportunities you see for highly sensitive people in this moment in history?
Yeah, this is definitely a moment. I will say I see a lot of fear and
Hmm.
anxiety and
Hmm.
insecurity at the root
Yeah,
of all of that.
right.
Well, I think a huge challenge for us is how do we have compassion
Hmm. Right.
for people who think very differently from us? Maybe we
Hmm.
absolutely disagree with their political leanings, and yet, how can we still humanize them? How can we
Hmm.
still empathize with them? How can we
Right.
still try to kind of build up our capacity to care for them? Um, because I think so much of what we're seeing nowadays is about dividing people, right?
Hmm.
And
Right.
and turning us against one another, dehumanizing one another, othering, other groups. And and so I would love to see, and I think there are pockets of this that I'm seeing here and there, but I would love to see a groundswell of people standing up and saying, no, that's not
Hmm.
okay. We're not going to be that way. We choose to be accepting. We choose to be inclusive. We choose to empathize with those who are different from us. We choose to have honest but respectful conversations and true engagement, like coming from a place of genuine
Hmm.
care with people, regardless of their background, their political affiliation, who they voted for in the last election. I am still choosing to see you as a fellow human being, to
Hmm.
recognize that there is so much that we have in common. And even the places where there is not commonality, we can still connect. We can still choose to try to understand one another.
Hmm.
Um, and because I think, I see it on both sides of the political spectrum of people drawing those defining lines of you're either in or you're
Hmm.
out.
Hmm.
And I think that as a result, we're sort of all playing by the same rules, even if we
Hmm.
are political opposites, right? And so I would love to see more people actually throw out that rule book entirely and be like,
Hmm.
no, this is not the game we're playing. We are
Hmm.
not playing this game of, antagonizing one another and hurling insults across, social media at each other. We are choosing to come together, even though it's really hard. It's
Hmm.
challenging, it's uncomfortable.
Hmm.
We are choosing to see you as, one another as equals, as fellow human beings, first and foremost, before anything else. I think that that is really critical because until we learn to talk to one another, care for one another,
Hmm.
just be together in the same space with one
Hmm.
another, until we can do that, there's really only so much that all of our work and activity is going to be able to do, right?
Hmm.
Because that means that if we don't invite in more people to the conversation, there aren't going to be that many of us, right?
Hmm.
That
Hmm.
that are trying to bring about change. And and so that's something I feel really strongly about, but I also recognize it's incredibly difficult. I find myself wrestling with that all the
Well,
time, every
so I
day.
was, I guess, curious what you found that and nurture that and foster that, right? Like if
Mhm.
there's any things, I mean, nonviolent communication would be something I think of immediately, you know, or like what are things that foster empathy or perspective
Yeah.
taking
Well, I
or
think,
things like
yes,
that.
a lot
Yeah.
of it starts with ourselves, needing to work
Hmm.
on ourselves, because
Hmm.
we all are going to have biases. We're all going to have um, preconceived notions, ideas, maybe past experiences that we carry with us that will shape how we see other people. That's just unavoidable. And so a lot of it I find is working on ourselves to be open to I am choosing to just, kind of come into this to see you with a bit of a blank slate. Like, I'm
Hmm.
not going to prejudge you, right? And so that kind of interior work, I find there are certain practices that I need to lean on, or just ideas that I need to meditate on. I'm a person of faith, and so I think about every human being, being in the image of God, no matter who they are, what they do, what they believe, right? We are all
Hmm.
made in the image of God. I pray for people that I really, um, even on a good day, I really don't like them, that I pray
Hmm.
for them.
Hmm.
But it's painful, but it's these practices that I think open up
Hmm.
our heart
Hmm.
to see people in a different way, to see them with
Yeah.
more curiosity and less
Yeah.
judgment, and more of a desire to be like, okay, I actually want to know who you are. I want to understand you. One of my favorite practices is the loving kindness meditation,
Mm-hmm.
right? To basically wish goodness upon uh, certainly those around us, friends, family members, neighbors, that's wonderful. And then I think the stretch of that is to wish love and goodness for people we don't like, or people we
Mm-hmm.
strongly disagree with, people we are on, the opposite side of the political spectrum with. That practice of, I want the best for you. I want what is good for you.
Mm-hmm.
I want
Mm-hmm.
you to experience joy and happiness in your life. And to say it, even if you're not feeling it, which I admit
Mm-hmm.
there are times that I am not feeling it at all, but there is something that happens, right? When we continue to practice that, it,
Mm-hmm.
it does change how we feel, how we think. And so I think that opening up ourselves first to the possibilities of seeing people differently is probably one of the first steps. And then certainly what you're saying of actually doing it. Like, how do I engage with people in a caring, nonviolent, meaningful way? And that can be very small. You don't need to, schedule a 3-hour meeting with somebody. It could just be practicing in your daily interactions while you're running errands, while you're engaging with family members or neighbors, right? It's a habit, right? Like, how do we
Mm-hmm.
build these habits of kindness and respect? Um, and one of the statistics I came across in my research for the book, that's one of my favorites, was, Adam Grant, the organizational um, psychologist, had looked at more than 500 studies of that involved two individuals from different backgrounds, different ethnic backgrounds, or different generations, different genders, different nationalities. And all these studies brought these people together, and they just sat down face to face. So not over Zoom, not over the phone, not over email, but they sat down face to face and had one conversation with each other. They didn't know each other. It was not a conversation about trying to convince each other of something or to change the other's mind. It was simply a like, let's get to know each other conversation. And
Mm-hmm.
those conversations alone reduced prejudice. I think it's something like 94% of the time.
That's
Just
amazing.
having a very simple, humanizing interaction with
Yeah,
somebody who's different from you. And I don't know of any other form of activism that has that high of a level of success, right?
right.
And this is something that we can all do, and we can do
Yeah.
anytime, anywhere. And so this idea of relational activism, it's so powerful, and I really do hope that more and more of us, that it's not, I think it can be tempting sometimes to feel like, oh, we need this grand strategy, we need to coordinate all these components so that it all comes together perfectly to address the forces that we're trying to resist. And that's not a bad thing, but I think we can underestimate the power of just, all of these thousands, millions of little interactions that people are having, these acts of kindness that we are engaging in, those have a huge impact as well. And to not discount that in the ability to transform the way people think and interact with one another. We started off this part of the conversation talking about fear and anxiety, right? And
Mhm.
so, how do we really understand the roots of that fear and anxiety? How can we be a friend and a support to people who are struggling with that so that they don't feel the need to turn to authoritarian leaders or other more oppressive, suppressive systems, right? That they
Mhm.
can already feel like their needs are being met in other healthier, more inclusive ways.
Right. Yeah, that makes me think of the name of this podcast, right? Like who we are and what we need. That at least
Absolutely.
as a therapist, I've felt like if we could like have a society be more centered around human needs and just meeting human needs, right? Because then if our needs are met, if we feel cared for, loved, like we belong, like we're seen and important, and our financial needs are met, and our emotional needs are met, and our spiritual needs are met, then we're less likely to have anxiety and fear and division and like blaming and polarization and that kind of thing.
Right.
And so I guess, yeah, every time we humanize and meet a need, like we are coming closer to that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I love that. I'm curious what's bringing you joy right now.
Hmm. Well, I will say that teaching high schoolers, especially with my personality of being so introverted and sensitive, it's wonderful and it's exhausting. And so right now, naps are bringing me a lot of joy.
Mm-hmm.
That is where I get a lot of restoration from. I have two kiddos. They're super fun. So I think taking those moments to really be present with them, um, also brings me joy. Um, Community, nature. I think it's a lot of what um, a lot of people rely on. I am a creative soul as well, and so movies, books, art. Yeah, I think choosing to, as we were saying earlier, um, not expose ourselves to, at least not constantly expose ourselves to the things that really drain us and grow our anxiety and our fear, but choosing to reallocate that time toward the things of beauty and goodness in this world because there is still so much around us. I think that that's a really healthy practice. I am a naturally despairing person, and so it has actually been something I've had to learn to
Mm-hmm.
seek out joy, and it's a bit of a discipline for me because my natural tendency is to, just spiral into a deep, dark black hole of of sadness and anger and all of that. So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's really, really important, I think, for all of
Yeah.
us to restore ourselves, to reinvigorate ourselves, and to kind of give remind ourselves, why are we doing this work?
Right.
What are the good and beautiful things in this world among humanity that we are wanting to preserve, that we are wanting to protect, that we are wanting to promote? And that is oftentimes what I find when I go explore these avenues of joy.
Yes. Yeah. And like living in that and amplifying that for yourself. I love that.
Definitely.
Yeah. I'm curious if there's anything you're reading or any artists you've come across that are nourishing your soul right now or just bringing you, I don't know, pleasure and joy.
I'm actually really enjoying an American history podcast right now.
Mhm.
It's called A History That Doesn't Suck. And the person who does the podcast, the host, well, for one thing, he's just really funny, so that certainly makes history more palatable. He's a fantastic storyteller. He speaks a bunch of different languages and speaks with all kinds of
Oh,
accents, so
cool.
that makes it fun as well. Um, so it's super informative. I mean, I love history and learning about history, but I've also found it to be strangely encouraging in that there's a sense of, as hard as things may feel now, it's not like this has never been seen before, right? That sense
Mhm.
of people have been through really, really hard things before. Um, and and so it doesn't necessarily mean it's the end of the world, right? People have gotten through it. And not only that, but in history you see that in these moments of hardship, of trial, of suffering, of oppression, there are always amazing individuals and communities and organizations that will rise up, that will meet the moment, that will do extraordinary acts of love and compassion and sacrifice for the sake of all of us. And that's really, really encouraging,
Mhm.
and so that feel of, this is but one moment in a long human history that we have existed in. I think it makes everything a little bit less daunting, a little bit less
Mhm.
scary, right?
Yes.
Um, and it gives me hope that the stories will continue to be written, and there will
Yeah.
continue to be remarkable people who make a huge difference in their communities and in the world.
I love the example that you gave in the book of the reaching out to the FARC rebels in Colombia with
Yeah,
like
an
soccer balls
extraordinary story.
that say, let's play again, right? Or you might want to, you can tell the story better than I can, but it just was incredible to me, the imagination and love that
Yeah.
people were willing to have to reach out to the rebels and say, come home. Like,
Yes.
we want you
Yes.
home. Put down
Yeah.
your
I
weapons,
mean,
come home.
it was
Like,
essentially an advertising campaign, right? The Colombian government had brought in a marketing executive because just the pure, like military response, that wasn't working. And so I think the hope ultimately was, can we appeal to the humanity of these other individuals, many of whom are our family members, friends, former neighbors, right? And so the campaign revolved around things, commonalities, right? So like you said, soccer and dropping soccer balls from airplanes to invite the rebels to come back and play, lighting up trees in the forest like Christmas trees and saying like,
mm,
come home for the holidays and celebrate with us, right? So they were messages of promise and hope and relationship and welcome, right? Not of condemnation. And it was incredibly successful. I think that
mhm,
it spoke the language of the heart and the soul that we all want to hear, no
mhm.
matter who we are and or what we're feeling about the state of the world. Um, and so it's a really meaningful reminder that there are ways that we can reach one another, even across these seemingly, impossible divides.
Yeah.
There are always going to be ways that we can talk to each other, that we can communicate care for each other. And I think that's really where something new and transformative can begin.
Yes, I agree. Well, thank you so much for being here, Dorcas. I don't know if there's anything else that we missed that you'd like to share as we're wrapping up.
Yeah, well, I think I would just want to encourage, especially those individuals who identify as highly sensitive, empathic, introverted, to know that you have so many gifts to bring, that we all can benefit from your engagement, your participation, your giving, even if it's just a little bit of yourself, if that's all you can do, that is totally fine. But we will all be better for it, for your gifts, for your presence, and I hope that you can see that, that you can understand that we need you, that you are an essential part of our ability to move forward as communities and societies, to notice those who are being marginalized, being left behind, not being heard or cared for. You all are the counselors and advisors and caretakers that we need. So I hope that you can truly feel that sense of value that you have. It's not an accident. The personality that you have, the particular traits that you have, they're beautiful and wonderful, and I hope you'll share them with the world.
It's so beautiful. On that note, thank you so much, Dorcas, for being here. It's such an honor to have you. Thank you for your wisdom. And listeners, thank you for tuning in. This is the end of season 3, and I will see you again in season 4. Bye.